Welcome to the show designed to give you crypto confidence. Created by the marketing communications specialists at Blocksparks, we want to help you learn about cryptocurrency and blockchain in a safe and friendly place. Because we believe this stuff is far too exciting to leave it to the geeks. Come and join us to learn more. So welcome back, and following the payment gateway episode last time, it was really interesting to hear from so many listeners just how poorly understood, frankly, the interface between buyers and sellers online are generally, and how many banks and other financial institutions are involved when you want to get funds from one person to another. It's not as simple as just clicking one button to pay for something. We think we're paying the other person directly, but unless it's cash, we're almost always not. Now, with cryptocurrency, it can be. You can actually pay funds from one person directly to another. But most often when we're buying and selling cryptocurrencies or trading one for another, we still have third parties involved. That doesn't have to be the case. Alternatives do exist, and we're really glad to have with us today Nathan Worsley from LocalCoinSwap. LocalCoinSwap is a decentralized exchange that we're going to learn all about today. And in the interests of transparency and disclosure, I'm very proud to say that Blocksparks has worked with LocalCoinSwap, and I've written for their blog. It's a project we're very excited about, and they're coming up to their public launch. So this is the perfect time to be talking to them. Welcome, Nathan.
Hi, Maya. Thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you with us today. Now, can you tell us a bit more about LocalCoinSwap and what you've built?
Well, I guess when I think of LocalCoinSwap, I'd say it's sort of three semi-distinct things. It's firstly a platform, it's secondly a token model, and it's also a community. I mean, we have the trading platform itself, which is a peer-to-peer decentralized trading platform. And underpinning the platform, we have a token economics model, which is based on the local CoinSwap token. But I guess most importantly, these two things would be meaningless without the community. I think probably the biggest thing that local CoinSwap is the community that's behind it. I guess I'm sure you know, it's a community-owned exchange, and you know that permeates everything that we do.
Okay, so what does it mean that it's a community-owned exchange? Why is that important?
Well, I mean, when you use sort of any other exchange that's currently around, there's lots of different features and aspects that other exchanges have. But at the end of the day, when you're trading on another exchange, you're making profit for someone else. I mean, you trade, you pay the fee, and the fee goes to someone. And I mean, some of these exchanges are making a lot of money, like billions of dollars even. And that's all the money that they're making off your trading activity. So what we've done is we've actually decentralized the ownership of our exchange. So the people who trade on the exchange actually take the profits from the exchange. And currently it's a very unique token model that I think we're the first to do.
Right, okay. So if the people at the center of the exchange aren't making the money, how do people trade then? How does a transaction happen between two individuals?
Well, local CoinSwap is peer-to-peer. So it means that while we have a centralized platform that facilitates the trade, you actually trade directly with the other person and not with a third party.
Wow.
So, I mean, rather than working with like a single entity, you know, a single bank account or a sort of single point of failure, we're allowing you to trade directly with other people in a permissionless manner. And we facilitate the transaction just to the level that we can prevent fraud or theft.
Okay, so is it safe then if I'm buying cryptocurrency from somebody I've never met? They might be in another country. How does LocalCoinSwap keep me safe?
Well, if you were just to trade with the person, as in, you know, send them the money, you know, they send you the fiat currency or whatever, you know, you'd definitely be taking a risk there, which is why we have an escrow system. So the idea, it's very similar to eBay. You know, you go and you want to buy something on eBay, you don't just send the money directly to the seller. You allow eBay to facilitate the transaction. So they hold onto the funds during the transaction. And then, you know, if you actually receive the product, then the transaction goes to the seller. And if there's some kind of like issue of fraud or theft, or, you know, the seller tries to rip you off essentially, then eBay steps in, sees who's in the right, and sees who the payment should go to. So local CoinSwap is essentially providing the same service, but with cryptocurrency.
Okay.
So people trade with each other, but we facilitate the transaction in that if there's no issues, both parties agree, then the funds go from buyer to seller or seller to buyer. And if there's some kind of fraud issue, then we can step in, see who's in the right, and ensure that both parties are safe. So
Brilliant.
So yeah, dealing directly with another person, there's always that risk of trust, but the escrow system is designed to mitigate that.
Perfect. So you are really like the eBay of cryptocurrencies.
That's the goal.
Perfect. Okay. So that peer to peer then is meaning that if I'm trading with somebody, they're a sort of in equal in the transaction with me, and you're just kind of mediating it in the middle and making sure that we play fair with each other. Is that
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I guess that was essentially sort of the original vision of cryptocurrency. I mean, the very
Mm.
first white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, literally was titled Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash, like Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So I think peer-to-peer really goes to the heart of the intentions of cryptocurrency right from the beginning.
That's very true, and so different from the way that certainly that an awful lot of people buy into cryptocurrency presently using fiat currencies. The traditional exchanges are operated incredibly differently from that model, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a lot of this is like very opportunistic on the part of some of these like exchanges. They're trying to do essentially bring all the same problems that you see in like traditional finance. They're just trying to set up the same kind of model in cryptocurrency. So I really hope that we can try and push for something different.
It does feel like it's getting back to the heart of what was originally envisaged for cryptocurrency, and maybe some of the oldest ways in history that people have done deals with one another directly on a peer to peer level. I mean, what other use cases are there for peer to peer that we could talk about?
Well, I guess I can give you a good personal example, actually. This is sort of like a use case for why peer-to-peer has advantages over centralized trading. I was
Mm.
actually in Turkey a couple of weeks ago, and I arrived in Turkey and I went to my hotel and I went to pay for it with my credit card and it didn't work. Like the credit card, I had money on the credit card, it should have worked. It just wouldn't accept it on their machine.
Oops.
So I'm like, oh no, I phone up the company. It's out, they're overseas. It's outside of their hours. So I'm just stuck there in Turkey in the lobby of a hotel, and they're not going to. I don't have anywhere to sleep. They're not going to let me stay in the
Oh
hotel room.
no.
So I mean, luckily, I knew what to do because I've been involved in the cryptocurrency scene for a while, and I was lucky enough that I had access to cryptocurrency. So I got on my laptop, and I found a local trader in Turkey. And within about 2.5, I had to sit in the lobby for a while, have some food. But within about 2.5 hours, I was meeting up with a local trader from Turkey, and we were conducting a transaction in the lobby of the hotel. We had our laptops.
Fantastic.
He was giving me Turkish lira, and then yeah, he left, and I went and paid for the hotel room. I mean, if it wasn't for cryptocurrency, I could have. I don't know what
You'd
I would
still
have
be
done.
sitting there.
Yeah, probably would have had a miserable holiday. So I guess that's a real use case of peer to peer.
Yeah.
I like nothing against Binance. I like Binance for example, but my Binance account was not going to help me in that situation. My Bitfinex account was not going to help me in that situation. It was literally a situation that could only be solved with a peer to peer trade.
Yes, so that sense of being part of a global community where you could say, "Help, I need lira," and somebody was able to step up locally and come and sort you out. I mean, that's the kind of thing you hear about mega social media influencers being able to pull off via Twitter or something. But for most of us, it's out of the reach of our normal day to day lives. But because you're part of this local coin swap network, you were able to make that happen. That's a fantastic example.
Well, that's something that we really want to try and build on. I mean, like I was kind of lucky in that there were local traders in Turkey, but there's not local traders everywhere. And I think that that's more just because there's not sort of as much awareness as there should be of this type of trading. I mean,
Mm.
if you're in America, Turkey, Australia, many places in Europe, you can quite easily find a local trader, but there's just the market hasn't developed yet in a lot of the world, and that's something that we really want to push for to try
Yeah.
and really popularize this method of trading.
But I
But I mean,
suppose if you are in America or Europe, it's much easier to go and use a centralized exchange as well and take your dollars or your euros, trade them for whatever you want. It must be in less developed countries around the world that
yeah,
crypto can make the difference.
yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up because I mean, you see a lot of people in the cryptocurrency scene who aren't always really understanding of what it's like for other people in the world. Like they're like, oh, why do I even need this? It's so easy for me to like I just walk down to my bank or I just do a transaction with my iPhone or whatever. But I mean, for some people, this is literally an issue of survival.
Mm.
You've got a lot of countries at the moment where the fiat currency of the country is essentially worthless, or if it's not worthless, it's just changing in value every day. To the point where people are often abandoning it. I mean, I'm sure you've done some traveling around the world and seen how many countries are just using the US dollar because they haven't been able to trust their own governments not to debase it.
Yeah.
And there's countries that are in even worse situations where the government won't let it happen and it just forces the people to be poor, like you see in Venezuela at the moment, where they're just literally in crisis. And that's a real, I mean, that's somewhere where cryptocurrency adoption is really taken off because, like I said, for these people, it's literally survival. If they don't have cryptocurrency or they can't use cryptocurrency, then yeah, they're stuck with this local currency that's just becoming 10 times less valuable every day.
It's quite difficult to imagine living like that if you are fortunate enough to be born into an economy where the fiat currency is relatively stable, where you have access to what we consider a normal range of banking products and services like credit and overdrafts and being able to access foreign currencies and things like that. And a lot of people either can't see the need for cryptocurrency or they point to a lot of the problems like the price volatility. Whereas if you are living with Zimbabwe dollars or Venezuelan
Yeah.
bolivars, I think, then, Bitcoin looks pretty stable.
Yeah, then you really have some price volatility on your
Yeah.
hands. It's also the fact that like it's not just how stable it is, but a lot of people just don't really have much access to banking. Like there's a huge percentage of the world that is unbanked at the moment, like the people that just don't have access to bank accounts. And I mean, they get ignored a lot by a lot of, mainstream exchanges or traditional cryptocurrency services because, I mean, these people generally aren't wealthy. If you don't have access to a bank account, then you're likely not a super wealthy individual. But these people who cryptocurrency could really help. I mean, there
Yeah.
obviously needs to be some development still on the technological side on, say, reducing transaction fees and making this stuff easier to use. But I mean, I think there's also a huge potential to just help the unbanked population of the world. I mean, they're like
Definitely.
other people who their survival. So this kind of stuff is crucial for their survival.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just in less developed countries as well. I think there's something like 1 million people in the UK who are unbanked for
Wow.
various reasons. It's really surprisingly high. I was reading something about it recently. And the one of the sort of worst injustices of it is that if you are in that situation, you probably pay more for your things like your utilities or any bit of borrowing that you have to do. You end up paying far more than the people who can better afford it, who have the better credit ratings and access to all these services. So it feels like what you're doing with local CoinSwap then is really stripping away all of these layers of services and ratings and different kind of overlays and going back to the most basic way that people do deals with each other. Just, I've got this, you want that. Can we meet in the middle somehow, either online or face to face, and make it work?
Well, yeah, and you also raised a really interesting point, I think, in your sort of introduction where you said that if you're not paying people direct, like if you're not paying people cash, it's not actually direct. And
Mm,
yeah, I also wanted to comment on that because not many people realize like the scary amount of or just the number of institutions that are involved when you just make a simple transaction at the
yes.
moment. Like
When you tried to
you said,
swipe your credit card in that hotel
yeah,
lobby, what was going on
yeah.
there?
Oh, I mean, they would have had their local machine would have done some validation, and that the transaction would have been processed by their bank. It would have been processed by the clearinghouse of the bank, the clearinghouse of the central bank, the clearinghouse of the international bank. Then there's like a global remittance handler, and this is just to get it like to another country. And then all that processing has to happen all the way to my bank on the other side of the world as well. It's got to be
Yeah.
processed by the international institution in my country, then the clearinghouse and the bank, and so on. So yeah, it's a crazy set of systems that are in place. They all require trust as well.
Yes, all these
You've got,
different institutions. I mean, it's not surprising that at some point along there, at some point, obviously, computer said no for some reason. But what is amazing is that that doesn't happen more often, I guess, when you look at all the
yeah,
links in the chain.
I think like for me, I was just experiencing like an inconvenience.
Mm,
But for a lot of people, this is like a serious interruption to their life. I
yeah,
mean, a lot of people deal with these issues every day.
yes. And all those institutions somehow have to contract with each other and trust each other and have guarantees with each other that these different bits of payment will get passed on or credited for or knocked off this ledger and accounted for on that one. It seems incredible that it works so well as it does.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's just this huge chain of trust. You got to trust someone who has to trust someone who has to trust someone. It's just yeah, it's just a complete web of relying on trust, basically.
Mm,
I think that's something really interesting about cryptocurrency is that it completely takes that away, and it's absolutely permissionless. I mean, if
yes.
you send someone a cryptocurrency transaction and there's no third parties involved, or, it's completely permissionless. You don't have to worry about whether a bank will accept the transaction or whether a clearinghouse will process it or anything like that. It's just direct.
That's amazing. But what you're offering with your platform then is a way that you centralize some aspects of it, like bringing the parties together in the first place. And I suppose that makes it safer for everybody to get involved and just kind of smoother.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess if it was just a straight crypto, if you were sending the person cryptocurrency and they were sending you a different type of cryptocurrency, you could absolutely do that, without any kind of system in place. It could be completely automated.
Mm.
But where I guess the market that we're providing for is the fact that one of the parties in a transaction on local coin swap is sending a fiat currency. So you've sort of like trying to mix that trustless system with a system that requires trust, which is where the fiat transaction is. So
Mm.
when so that's an area where you do like where some aspects do need to be centralized just by definition because you're dealing with a fiat currency and a cryptocurrency. So you need that escrow service there to ensure that neither party tries to fraud the other.
Yeah.
But you do get, I guess, some people asking why you can't decentralize the escrow system. And I mean, it has been tried. I think there are some like projects that have sort of theorized or try to implement this kind of thing. But I think at the end of the day, you need like an accountable third party. If you try and decentralize the escrow process and you have some random person overseeing the transaction, again, you require more trust for that random person than you would for a project or a company that you can actually hold accountable for providing the escrow service.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose because you're straddling that interface between sort of the old money and the new, the fiat and the hard, irreversible cryptocurrency, it's such an interesting space to be working in. And I think I mean I can remember watching sort of TV kidnapping cop shows and things like that, and they're doing a bank transfer at the end of the day, and they're waiting, and they watch a progress bar go across, and that's it. The baddie's got the funds, so we can release the prisoner or whatever. But actually, there's really no such thing as a completely irreversible bank transaction, is there? There's always
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
involved that could interfere with that in some way.
And that's kind of something I learned the hard way when before local coin swap I was doing peer-to-peer trading myself.
Ah,
And it's kind of scary how reversible almost everything is in fiat currency. I mean, I'd have, some transactions where a person would go and deposit cash into your bank account over the counter, and then a day later you might see that the transact, they'd try to reverse the transaction. They'd
well,
come in the bank and say, I made a mistake. I put it in the wrong person's account. And so, yeah, there's really almost always a way to reverse a fiat currency transaction.
so unless someone actually puts the dollar note in your hand and you run away with it,
Exactly.
if it's going that trusted third party, the bank it always has the power then to say, oh
Yeah.
no, we'll take that out of that account after all. That's really quite scary. And but I also think it's one of the most exciting things about cryptocurrency that it's once people grasp that, they suddenly realize the power of this, that it's actual money rather than some kind of fintech going on in the background of money.
Yeah, like I mean, if you own those private keys and no one else knows them, then that money is yours. That you're not relying on any trust from anyone else in the world to have your funds secure.
Yeah, it's really exciting that. And I think the more people start to get that, that's where the revolutionary stuff comes in. And I think things like the Tone Vase Proof of Keys event recently are really encouraging people to take full ownership of their cryptos and their private keys and get them off the centralized exchanges and learn how to take custody of them and use them and send them. I think that's where it gets really empowering, whether you're in Venezuela or Turkey or Europe or the US or anywhere else.
Yeah, it's been I guess one thing cryptocurrency has always been is an experiment in economics, really.
Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see like the different like that. I guess that's a really kind of interesting idea, like the proof of keys, because can you imagine if there was a mainstream push to do that with a regular bank? I mean,
Yeah.
because a regular bank couldn't do it.
Yes, well, we saw some of that 10 years ago, didn't we? It wasn't pretty. So, yeah,
Yeah,
there's a few regular banks that are no longer around and no longer those trusted institutions that we'd had in
yeah.
some cases for many decades. So,
I
yeah.
think thankfully, like as far as I'm aware, I don't think there was like any kind of exchanges that couldn't like do the proof of keys event. Like I could be mistaken, but as far as I'm aware, like it was a pretty good sign for the industry. There was
Yeah, I
no
think it
like
came out pretty well, actually, didn't it? There was some rumors about one exchange, I think, that just froze some accounts, but they kind of came good with it all within a day or so, I believe. Very different from fractional reserve banking and any kind of run
yeah.
that was planned on it. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it was obviously, I don't know how widespread the adoption was, but it did show that people were generally kind of able to trust these exchanges up to a point, I think. But hopefully it
Yeah.
made some people think more about their own custody issues and how they trade and where they want to be leaving their keys and what kind of wallets they use. And it is all just improved education and awareness, which is got to be good for all of us, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, and I mean, we're still developing the technology at this point. So,
Mm.
I mean, like, uh, I think, like, for the mainstream, a lot of this stuff is probably sounds sort of otherworldly and really complicated. And I guess one thing I'd like to make clear is I don't think that's always going to be the case. I mean, we're still developing the technology, and we're going to get it to a point at some point where this kind of stuff is very easy for the mainstream to get involved with.
Yeah, it's got to, hasn't it? The user experience. Well, I mean, even having seen LocalCoinSwap from your original soft launch in the autumn through all the design interface releases that you've been having up till now, it's all been about just making it more accessible, more clear, more obvious what's happening when you do different things around the site. And I think that's just got to be part of a trend for the industry overall to make it easier and easier for people to use. I mean, it used to be difficult to buy things online with a credit card.
Yeah.
A decade or so ago, it was more complicated and more chance of going wrong, or you didn't tend to accidentally sort of send your private keys to the wrong kind of account and lose them all or anything. But quite often the thing wouldn't go
Yeah, I
through.
guess. That's always the risk with cryptocurrency as well. That like, I mean, the biggest strength of cryptocurrency is that permissionlessness, but that's also the risk as well because any kind of transaction is irreversible. You
Mm.
make the mistake and if you send a transaction to the wrong place, there's absolutely no way that it can be recovered. So I mean, that's really something that we're trying to design those user interfaces around. I guess the
Yeah.
whole industry is at the moment trying to get this situation where you've got that risk or the fact that it's irreversible and the inherent security risks of having funds secured by a private key and making it so that it's something that your grandma or your grandfather could still use.
Yeah, and not be afraid of doing it wrong because you can trade lots of different currencies, can't you, on local coin swap?
Yeah, so at the moment you can trade about 20 cryptocurrencies, but we're sort of constantly working to implement more.
Mm.
So I mean a lot of platforms have just implemented a lot of ERC20 tokens, but we've actually gone the more difficult route and we've got a lot of distinct cryptocurrencies available on the platform. So we've sort of recently implemented Monero, Tether, a bunch of stable coins. We're working on some cool stuff now. I think some of it I'll probably have to keep under wraps just because we're launching our next lot of cryptocurrencies as a surprise on hard launch. But yeah,
Right.
we're still working quite hard on the cryptocurrency implementation.
Fantastic. Because I mean, there are sites I know where you can just trade Bitcoins peer to peer or just trade Ether, but to actually have a selection in one marketplace, I think is pretty radical. So it's exciting to know that you're continuing to add to that. What else do you think the future holds for consumers when it comes to buying and selling cryptos?
Well, I guess like as you're aware, and almost everyone in the industry is aware of, it's been like a tough year for a lot of investors in the scene. I mean, we had the technology went from unknown to being slightly known to just being in almost every paper. And I mean, ICOs came along and, some of them were good, most of them were bad. But I mean, as a side note, I don't think people should diss ICOs because although it has been a little bit of a wild west, ICOs do drive a lot of innovation.
Yes.
I mean, many sort of compare this to the dot-com boom, but I think you can even look further back at really the invention of securities themselves. Like, I mean, when you first had the idea of stocks or shares that were invented by companies, there was just a crazy amount of, scams, and it was a
Mm.
real wild west too. But can you imagine living in a world without like a stock market now?
Yeah.
It's inconceivable. So yeah,
Absolutely. And that has driven innovation and that has democratized investment. It's brought new people into the space. And exactly the same thing happened over the last couple of years with ICOs.
Yeah, and that awareness is a good thing, even though it's had its downsides. But I mean, it has been like a tough year, and so we just sort of focused on bootstrapping the project and just building and building and building. But I think, yeah, there's some really exciting stuff that's coming up in cryptocurrency. I think really at the end of the day, the technology is going to speak for itself. Like people get really hyped up on different coins, like they're supporting some kind of sports team, but it's not a contest of ego. It's a contest of technology. So I think in the next 2 to 5 years, you're really going to see the technology mature and come on its own. I think that's really going to speak for itself.
Yeah, and so hopefully we'll see more people finding it easy and accessible to use, a broader range of use cases maybe. Do you think we'll ever be paying for coffee with our cryptos?
I have actually paid for like coffee with cryptocurrency. I
Yay.
hope. I mean, it's sort of like, when I travel, if there's anywhere that I can spend cryptocurrency, I do it. But yeah,
Brilliant.
it's not really a mainstream thing yet. I think when it is, that's when you'll know that we've really made it.
Yeah. You're not Bitcoin
That's when
pizza
it really
guy, are
is
you?
mainstream. No. I guess nobody wants to be the next Bitcoin pizza person and spend like $40 million on pizza. But that guy did a huge, service to cryptocurrency. That was a landmark moment.
It
So I think,
was, yeah. And respect to Bitcoin Pizza Guy because, yeah, it was the first time that it was shown that we really could use cryptos to exchange for tangible, real world things. And
yeah.
just a slight inflation problem since then. Um,
I guess I'm not sure if he's been around since then. I wonder how he feels now about the purchase, if he's still happy with it, or if he sort of wishes he'd hoarded it. But then I wonder if he had just hoarded those bitcoins, if they'd even be worth anything today.
No, I think you're right. I think it really was a turning point, and yeah, it would be wonderful to get one of those real OGs on the show one day who've been in the space for potentially up to 10 years now, just to talk about how things have changed in terms of their expectations then versus what the market looks like now, and wonder what they think might happen in the next 10 years. Certainly, I suppose it goes to show the danger of making predictions.
Yeah, I mean, we really are still in an infancy stage. I mean, I like Bitcoin was invented in 2009, so it's been 10 years, just a little over 10 years, and it seems like that's a long time, but we're talking about like overhauling the global financial system here. That's not something that you can do in 10 years. That's something that takes a while.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of the potential of cryptocurrency, we're sort of at the 1% mark right now. Like we've really barely got started. We've got a proof of concept. We've got some cool projects that have come out. We've got some cool real world use cases, but we really haven't sort of broken the ice of what's possible.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's so much in the early adopter phase as well now. I think the next stage has to be to make things more accessible for people, more education, which is the gap that we're trying to fill, better tools, which is the gap that you're filling, and just try and open the door for people to get new people involved and seeing the benefits because the old
Yeah.
economy doesn't want to lie down and die, does it?
Yeah, and I think we really like the mainstream adoption really hasn't happened yet. I mean, like it's people are quite aware of cryptocurrency. There's no doubt about that. But there's sort of a lot of negative connotations that a lot of people have towards cryptocurrency, and there's a lot of things that we still haven't figured out yet with the technology. And to some degree, it is the fault of like the people in cryptocurrency. We have to take some responsibility. I mean, you see these hash wars and ego wars and
Mm.
flame wars, and this kind of stuff going on, and you can see why people have these negative connotations. But that's something that I think we all everyone involved in cryptocurrency has to take some responsibility to help us move past that and to really.
Definitely. The conversation needs to be a bit nicer some of the time, I think. I know people are passionate about their projects and their principles and what they think was the original vision of this or that. But if you look at crypto Twitter on an average day, you would just see it as something that I don't really want to get involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think like if my grandmother or I guess I'm kind of lucky in that my parents and grandparents are into cryptocurrency, but for most
Brilliant.
people, you imagine like what would they think if they were looking at this and they saw this? This we've got to really appeal to the mainstream to bring this thing to the mainstream. We have to be respectable. We have to be professional, and we have to make the technology really.
Definitely. And when you think about the institutions that crypto is effectively competing with. They are banks, and some of the most trusted, at least at one time, and established institutions in the world. It's a world away from bickerings about hard forks and slagging each other off on Twitter.
Yeah.
To reconcile those worlds is quite a challenge.
Yeah, can you imagine, like, the head honchos of two banks sort of going at it the way that you see some people in cryptocurrency going at it? I mean, it's just unimaginable. But it does show you where we want to be, like the way that we have to act in cryptocurrency to make this thing mainstream. I mean, we've got to be that level of professional and be respectable like that. We sort of have to mature a little bit as a space.
Yes, we do. And there'll probably be the price of that will be a certain degree of centralization or centralized tools for some users, I guess, that some people will prefer to have more mediated and managed services, whereas other people will prefer the true freedom and self-sovereignty of peer-to-peer transactions and holding their own keys and things like that. The same people who would rather keep their coins under the mattress because they don't trust the banks, and they've always existed. I think
definitely.
it's going to embrace both, I suppose. So it is very difficult to look ahead to the long term, but maybe looking more short to medium term, what things do you see coming up in 2019 that might impact how we buy and sell cryptocurrencies?
So I'm really excited about like the developments on both Bitcoin and Ethereum. I mean, on Bitcoin, you've got Lightning Network, which I'm really excited about. Like, I know it's experimental technology. I know that they're working past various problems, but if you've tried out I think they have one on your phone, on the Android. I've tried that one. It's incredible. I mean, like, it's so fast. It opens up all this potential for Bitcoin to really be like an instant payment system with no fees. Then you've got this proof of stake stuff that they're doing on Ethereum with Constantinople. I mean, that's just some really exciting stuff as well, because it has the potential to solve these environmental issues that we're seeing in cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And then you've got other projects that are doing really like interesting experimental stuff. Like, EOS is a very controversial project. Some people absolutely hate it. Some people absolutely love it. But, for me, I think it's a really interesting experiment in this sort of delegated democratic system that they got running on the blockchain. So I'm excited to see where that's going. And I mean, I'm also excited to see where they're going with this privacy stuff as well. We've got all these competing privacy coins like Zcash and Monero and so on. They've all got sort of the same philosophy but different technological ideas. I'm sort of really excited in the shorter term to see how that goes.
Yes, I wonder if one privacy coin is going to win out at some point. I think we might have to do an episode on privacy coins and all the different reasons behind them and how people are trying to solve this problem of the fact that the blockchain is public and immutable, and
Absolutely.
transactions are just there forever. And I think it's caught some bad actors out that they didn't expect chain analysis to actually point to who'd done the bad thing.
Yeah, people sort of don't realize that. I guess hopefully I won't get too sort of in depth here with the technology explanation, but like a Bitcoin, for example, is not like fungible in that like one Bitcoin is not exactly the same as another Bitcoin. And that's because both of those Bitcoins have a transaction history. So, I mean, you've really got the potential where, say, someone could say, oh, this wallet is blacklisted and every coin that's touched this wallet is, a bad coin or whatever. And then you start to get situations where coins are like worth less or more than other coins depending on their transaction history. So that's really like essentially the problem that privacy coins are trying to solve. I think it's a really interesting thing that like not a lot of people really thought about during the early years of cryptocurrency. Like, it was just never really a discussion topic for quite a few years.
No, and it's going to rather confuse all the poor mainstream media who still think that Bitcoin's just for sort of ransoms and drug deals and things like that. But it was quite interesting with the Cryptopia hack last week that some of those funds got sent to Binance and immediately got stopped there because they were immediately able to identify them as the stolen funds from another exchange just by the transaction histories on those blocks. So I think sometimes people don't realize quite how little privacy is actually baked into certain coins like Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess that was an example of sort of an ethical use case for like the privacy issues on the blockchain.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not always the case. Like, it's not always a positive thing.
No, no, indeed. And I think it just proves that how much everybody, even people who are very active in this space, still have to learn about it. But that's what keeps it interesting for all of us, I think. And it is fascinating. I love learning about this stuff, which is why we do this recording, why it's really great to have guests like yourself on, Nathan. So, big launch coming up for Local Coin Swap. How can people get hold of you? What's your web address? Where are you active on social media? What's the best way for people to get involved?
So our web address is localcoinswap.com, but our community is most active on our Telegram. So that's probably a good place if you want to jump in and get involved with the community.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've got some really cool stuff coming up. So we've been working really hard ahead of our launch, which is at the end of February, where we've got a bunch of cool things that we're going to release on our launch date. I've personally been overhauling the user interface for some time now, so I'm really excited. It's going to be like a total change of the user interface and a bunch of cool features dropping. And we've got some promotional stuff that we're launching on hard launch as well that's going to incentivize traders and some partnerships in the work. So I guess my advice would be join the community, just sort of check out what's happening, because we've got some really cool stuff that's going to drop on hard launch that you probably don't want to miss out on.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put links for everything into the show notes so that people can find you easily. And we'll be looking out on the 26th of February to see all this new reveal of all your fantastic new features. Nathan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
J is for JOMO. Yes, okay, I don't mind admitting we struggled a bit with a J. It doesn't even exist in some languages, after all. And whilst we could have hit you with a mathematical discussion about J-curves, we decided instead to talk about JOMO, the joy of missing out. Yes, today we celebrate JOMO, which is the antonym of the more frequently used term FOMO, fear of missing out. Because during this crypto winter particularly, missing out really rocks sometimes. To be honest, it's actually better now than during the hype phases of the cycle. In this exploding space, there are so many projects, solutions, ideas, and breakthroughs. There are over 2,000 tokens on CoinMarketCap. Which one should you buy? Token sales strive to generate urgency and anxiety with tight sale windows to make you anxious about getting in early on the next exciting project. What if you miss out on the opportunity of a lifetime? The thing is, investment decisions should never be made under such pressure. You have to deliberately let some things go in order to think properly about others and make the right decision. And if you're holding or hodling for the long term in crypto, then you have to stop worrying about price alerts. Turn off your phone once you finish enjoying this podcast and go and have a walk out of doors or read a book. I'd like to leave you with a poem by Michael Lunig, a bit of a first for the Crypto Confidence show, admittedly, but come with me because this captures it so beautifully. Oh, the joy of missing out when the world begins to shout and rush towards that shining thing, the latest bit of mental bling, trying to have it, see it, do it. You simply know you won't get through it. The anxious clamouring and need, this restless, hungry thing to feed. Instead, you feel the loveliness, the pleasure of your emptiness. You spurn the treasure on the shelf in favour of your peaceful self. Without regret, without a doubt. Oh, the joy of missing out. Thanks for listening to Crypto Confidence. If you like what you hear, please do consider leaving us a review via your favourite podcasting app and joining the conversation online in whichever way you prefer. Full contact details are in the show notes for this episode. And remember, nothing in this podcast or our related social media, nor anything else published by BlockSparks OU at any location, is intended as financial, investment or trading advice. Everything we write or say represents our personal opinions for your information, education and entertainment only. You should not make any decisions based on anything we share with you, not without undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with appropriate professional advisors. Crypto Confidence is all about being smart and informed and making the right choices for you.